Hi everybody and welcome back to another video on my channel. My name is Justin Caffrey and this channel is devoted to the vagus nerve, polyvagal theory and psychological safety. Combining these theories, we are building out an idea of how to increase human performance, how to make us happier and healthier, and really this is about me sharing all of the ways that I've healed myself over these past 8 years. So this is neuroscience that has application and purpose in terms of your life and even your business. If you want to follow me on a more regular basis, you can connect with me over on Instagram at Justin_Caffrey. I have a huge discount on at the moment for my online course. If you want to have a deep dive into 21 days of the vagus nerve and exercises around managing that for you, check out remotetribe.co.uk. And we're launching, super excited about this, the vagusnerve.com, a central repository for all things to do with the vagus nerve. That site is coming soon. It may already be up depending on when you're watching this video, so check it out, join our mailing list and get access to a ton of free information over there. Today's chat is with Dr. Gemma Newman. Gemma is a phenomenal physician based in the UK who I've been friends with for many years, and Gemma has a real passion around human well-being and outcomes that are based on nutrition, on diet, non-pharmacologically driven. And this chat is about my top tips for how people can manage anxiety and stress in these tumultuous times and how they can connect into the vagus nerve. Watch it till the end because there's some really good simple tips that you guys can apply yourself. Thanks for being part of the channel. Please like and subscribe. Stay connected. I read all my comments. Let me know what you're thinking and let's be on this journey together.
I'm delighted to be joined by the amazing Justin Caffrey, who is a really talented guy. He is a mindset coach and he's a good friend of mine. We've known each other for a long time. And yeah, I'm really excited to have him tell us some of his tips and share his wisdom with us. And I'm just going to have a look and see if he's joined. This live is sponsored by who I've been working with for about a year, and they wanted to provide some top wellbeing tips from an expert. So let me just make sure that they can join so their followers can listen in if they want to, and we will get cracking. We're going to have about a 15-minute chat, so I'm excited to have you all. Oh, hello.
Gemma, how are you?
Hi, Justin. Oh, I'm very well. It's so lovely to see you. I know. Oh, you're looking really well. Yeah, it has been. It's been a pandemic at least.
I think it's been a pandemic for all of us, and that's the harsh reality, unfortunately.
Yeah, yes, it is. And I guess that brings us nicely onto our topic. I know that we only really have about 15 minutes. We wanted to keep it short, but at the same time, I really wanted to offer people some genuine really important tips that are not only rooted in neuroscience but also in personal experience, which is why I chose Justin to talk to, because he is not only a wealth of knowledge but he's also somebody who has got a lot of heart and has really in his own life struggled with ways of finding well-being. So if it's all right, Justin, if we could start off by explaining why it is that you are somebody that talks so much about mindfulness.
Absolutely.
And its importance.
Thanks, Gemma. I think particularly from my perspective, I arrived at this search for knowledge in terms of understanding what's happening in the mind and the body and the nervous system on the back of losing our second child, Joshua, who Joshua lived for 11 months and he died in 2011. And in terms of the impact that has, of course, losing somebody is really difficult. Losing a child is extremely difficult, both for myself and my wife and for my son, because it's not really something that you anticipate or expect in your life. You certainly believe that you will outlive your children. And Joshua's death brought a huge junction in our life. Up until that point, I had lived a very successful career in financial services, working in the UK, working in London, ever since I was 19. And really everything that I wanted in life at that stage, and every problem that I'd encountered was always easily to get around as long as you just stayed focused and determined and you push through and, have that mentality to keep going. But then something like this happens, which is a profound tragedy that nobody's prepared for. And with the loss of Joshua, I learned my first valuable lesson on the pathway to recovery and helping myself. And that was not really stepping into my grief. I didn't lean into the grief after Joshua's death. And I really did what I think a lot of people do, and probably more so men than women. And certainly in the case of my wife, she really moved into the grief of losing her son immediately after Joshua's funeral. Whereas I moved to planning to build the next thing, a new business, a new opportunity, and I was building a business in another country. I was moving myself to a point within weeks of starting to travel on planes, creating huge amounts of volatility in my life at that moment, which was incredibly volatile and tumultuous anyway, because we're recovering from the death of Joshua. And what happened that I came to see afterwards was that I was not dealing with my mental health problems as they were occurring. I was putting them away and hoping that I would be able to push through. And over the course of the next 2 years, my life started to deteriorate. My physical health became really poor with multiple autoimmune health issues. And of course, you go and you have your heart checked, and I had chronic pain, I had sinusitis, I developed adult asthma. And each time you go and you have these things checked by your physicians, and it's the acute focus on the condition rather than what's happening to you right now as a human being. So nobody was giving me the answer. And it all really came to a head when I had a panic attack in a really important meeting. And I suppose to give you an idea of my mindset at the time, I thought, this might be a heart attack or a stroke. I'm not too sure which it is, but it's not that bad. So I think I can probably close the deal, finish the meeting, and then go to hospital.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. That is really telling,
not
isn't it?
advisable, please, for anybody if you feel that way. But that brought me to a point of realizing I need some help, and I spoke to my wife at the time afterwards, and she had already started to notice that I wasn't myself, and it was becoming clearer and clearer that I needed to really come to terms with the grief. I was feeling really quite overwhelmed with anxiety. Trauma was reappearing in my life, and I was getting that kind of classic Hollywood movie flashbacks of trauma, seeing Joshua's final moments and only seeing them for split seconds, but it was becoming intrusive. And then I was feeling catastrophized about everything in my life, so everything started to become incredibly overwhelmed. I knew I needed help. I didn't want to go down the medicated route if I could avoid it, and certainly not saying that people shouldn't do that if it's needed. It always has a time and place. But I come from a very difficult childhood where my father was medicated all the way through his life. He had electric shock treatment. He had multiple encounters with suicidal experiences, failed, thankfully. But I wanted something different. I found an Indian physician working in Ireland who'd worked in the NHS and the HSE, but had developed a technique more akin to the teachings from his grandfather growing up in India, rather than the pharmacological route that he had endeavored to pursue for 25 years, but was generally seeing not the greatest outcome in terms of what was happening there. So I went into therapy with him for 3 or 4 months. I finished that, was blown away by it, and I said to him, I want you to teach me everything that you know. And over the course of the next 2 years, I trained with him, and then I rocked up to my board investment management firm, hedge fund type environment, and told them I'm leaving. I want to be a coach and therapist, and they thought I'd lost my marbles completely. And here I am.
Well, in actual fact, it turns out that you'd found your marbles.
Yes,
well and truly.
I like to think so. Or at least I think a sense of purpose, which is so important in terms of how we live.
Yes. Yes, exactly. With marbles being an analogy for purpose, I suppose, in my mind. Yes. Oh, what a story. And that must have been quite the journey. So unfortunately, we don't have much longer. I'd love to perhaps bring you back on another time, and we can go into a lot more detail about that. But given your background and all the things that you have shared with us so far, what would your kind of advice be for people who are struggling at the moment, who want sort of a first step towards well-being, but they're not really quite sure where to go? And I know that you've been studying this with relation to neuroscience and how the brain works as well. So if there's any sort of science-based tips that you could give us, that would
Yeah,
be
I
fantastic.
think one of the great things to try and remember is, a wonderful an acronym which is VUCA, VUCA, and that's just understanding where I'm at the moment. And if you're in your situation, you're in life right now, which we've all come through 2 years of a pandemic, and now we're facing into this uncertain world in terms of a terrible global conflict and suffering on our news channels. So even if we're feeling well and healthy ourselves, there are external influences that are impacting us in terms of how we feel. And VUCA stands for, the V is for volatility, the U is for uncertainty, the C is for complexity, and the A is for ambiguity. So it's a nice little self-diagnosis in terms of what's happening in my life at the moment. Do I have volatility in my life? And if I reflect back to my time after losing Joshua, I had extreme volatility, both in terms of his death and then the fact that I decided to start a new business. Uncertainty. I had real uncertainty because when somebody dies in your life, you have a tragic event, we get racked with guilt and we start to question ourselves. So if the internal dialogue is asking questions of yourself, and those questions are tinged with negativity, then it's a little warning sign to think about, okay, is this real? Is this real self-talk, or is this my nervous system getting into overdrive? Complexity. How complex is my life? We know that human beings have a capacity to manage 5 key tasks at any one time. When we start to throw in 6, 7, and 8, we overwhelm the mind and the nervous system. So just noticing how complex your life is. And then ambiguity. Where there is a void, anxiety loves to exist. So if you have ambiguity in terms of things that you're uncertain about or difficult conversations that you're not leaning into, actually moving towards that and getting closer to this wonderful expression, which is psychological safety. Do I feel safe in myself? And am I safe in my work environment? Am I safe in my family environment? Little tests just give people the capacity to understand maybe there are things I need to focus upon. Now, there's 3 little tips that I use that are really practical for people to implement. But I think if you think about that as the macro picture, a quick kind of helicopter look at your life and see how you are. Simple little tips, 3 S's if you're feeling overwhelmed: sleep, sharing, and scheduling. Sleep is critical. I can advocate healthy living. I use a lot of meditation and mindfulness practices myself. We can talk, of course, about diet and the impact on the microbiome and all those kind of things. But number one is sleep. Sleep deprivation is a form of human torture. And if you're not getting enough sleep, you will feel anxious. If I had 3 days of not sleeping very well, I will feel anxious. I'll find all kinds of things to feel anxious about because our nervous system starts to ruminate. It feels like we must be under threat because we're not sleeping properly. So it looks for things to be problematic. So number one is sleep, and really simple things: scheduling your sleep well, recognizing how much time you need, getting to bed early, creating a nice environment in your room, and mobile phones. Really trying to avoid them as best we can before we sleep. But sleep is key for anxiety. We're doing this on mobile phones, which is never good. But, we're communicating the message.
I know, I know. I think that's probably one of the big ones for a lot of people. Let me
Yeah.
go back over the VUCA: volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. So I've written notes. What's the difference I'm trying to understand in my mind when we're looking at the big picture and where we can start to notice where there are some imbalances in our lives that will then set us up for these feelings of anxiety. What's the difference between uncertainty and ambiguity? Can you would you be able to tell me a
Uncertainty.
bit more
So if you
about
think
that?
about your work life or your relationships, it's quite a definitive sense of self. Okay, I'm uncertain about my work because I work with a colleague who is intimidating, who's bullying, who's putting me under pressure. The culture in my work makes me feel quite uncertain. Or it might be in your relationships at home, your partner is making you feel uncertain. There is negative use of language. You're feeling that you're being suppressed or separated. So it's something that's really being done to you in the terms of your life and what's going on. Okay. Ambiguity tends to be what is unresolved. So people with anxiety will often experience huge amounts of shame, regret, worry, guilt. And this is ambiguity in terms of I can't really understand what's happening in terms of how I feel about this person or this issue or myself, especially when we're starting to feel really hopeless and helpless. So, where we resolve ambiguity is by finding the capacity to speak to another person, a therapist, a friend, a family member, that ability to communicate. And in my story, that was just simply speaking to my wife and opening up around my own vulnerability. So if we remove that ambiguity and we start to communicate, we're already starting to heal.
Yeah, okay. That makes a lot of sense. So the uncertainty is founded in the things that you feel you're not in control of in your life, and the ambiguity is founded in the feelings of unresolved issues that you haven't really kind of necessarily
Absolutely. And I
come to
think,
terms with.
within VUCA, when you think about volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, and then you reflect on things in your life, you will also get a felt sense of what's happening in your body. When you touch on those difficult things, that difficult relationship, that person who undermines you, you'll feel it, the tension in your chest, your shoulders, you'll feel it in your stomach, your bowels. So the nervous system really shows up to provide a light to say to you, something needs your attention here. So it's the felt self, the somatic connection to the body is a great way to check in on what is really problematic in your life. And even just writing it down in a list and just working it out and then thinking, now I can speak to a friend or a therapist. But you can do this little self diagnosis, which really helps you find your way forward.
Yeah, thank you, Justin. And then coming back to those three S's, sleep is an absolute foundation, and an awareness that everything really does feel a bit better once you've had a good night's sleep. And it doesn't necessarily solve all your problems, but it certainly doesn't contribute to them, which
Absolutely.
insomnia can. And sharing and
Yeah, exactly.
scheduling, you said as well. So just give us a little bit more information on those two, and then we're going to have
Great.
to draw this to a
Sharing.
close.
So, really, again, going back to a problem shared is a problem halved. Speaking to other people about what's going on, in terms of, again, using that phrase, psychological safety, we know that in environments where people communicate effectively, they feel safe. And within that safety, they have a capacity to heal and recover. So if we're constantly feeling under pressure or intimidated, our nervous system is staying in that fight and flight response. So sharing is just that capacity to unburden ourselves. And even sharing with yourself by writing things down is moving chaos onto paper that allows you to just create a little bit of structure in your life. So finding that capacity to share with another person if you can, But if you don't have access to that, even just sharing your thoughts with yourself, but in a way that they're written and more easily to digest, can be helpful. Because again, it just removes ambiguity. I see what's going on.
Yeah, thank you. That's really helpful. And then scheduling is essentially to make sure that you keep the promises that you're making to yourself in terms of the things that you're aiming to do.
Scheduling in terms of, so there can be all the goals and aspirations that you have, but scheduling in downtime, time in nature. It's that idea of doing less to accomplish more. You know, you're slowing down, you're going to do less, but by rewarding your nervous system, your mind, and your body, you're building up, you're recharging that battery, which allows you to then do so much more in terms of what's needed for the pathway ahead. So just simple little tips that we can all do. And you know, I have to write them down. I have notes in my diary. I have reminders, because we can all live in the space of helping others, but we also have to remember we must help ourselves. So it's really important to recognize that you have to put the time aside and make sure that you show up for yourself in your own journey.
Yeah, thank you, Justin. You're so right. I don't know about everyone else, but I know that I have found that really useful, just to kind of bring me back to not only the big picture of looking at our life and where things are going, but also the simple practical things that we can do when we notice that there are imbalances that we want to address. So yeah, it's been absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much, Justin.
Thanks, Gemma. Always lovely to talk, and great if we can share a few tips to help people, all the better.
Exactly. And if people want to know more about you and your work, where can they
there's
find
a whole
you?
bunch of free content on YouTube all around making neuroscience simple and practical for people to implement. So search Justin Caffrey on YouTube, or you can reach out to me on Instagram or
Brilliant.
at justincaffrey.com.
Fantastic. And also, I should say before we go, a huge thanks to Cannabitech for sponsoring this live. They have a huge commitment to science and research, and they have a selection of their own unique CBD and medicinal mushroom products, one of which is called Relax Drops. So if you want to check that out, go over to cannabitech.com. So
Thanks,
thank
Gemma.
you. Thank you, Justin. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for all those people that are watching live right now. And I hope that you have a wonderful day. And yeah,
Take care.
see
Bye,
you again
everybody.
soon.
Bye, Gemma.
Bye.